Hi everyone, Damien and John here again, and today we're going to chat to you about some strategies and practices to keep in mind now that you're back in training, especially from, say, a GAA perspective, where you might be quite busy at the moment with championship coming up very quickly. And yeah, it's just some practices, some strategies on how to increase your aerobic capacity, some include some speed work from a safe perspective. After we've gone through that, then we're going to chat a little bit on your everyday exerciser and some strategies on how to go allowing yourself back into your daily exercise, into into different practices that you might be looking to undertake. So, John, how
Yeah,
are
one
we?
of the best methods we've both found working with teams and from looking at particularly successful coaches is to use the tempo method for both aerobic stuff work and to keep speed, I suppose, technique at a high level as possible. So just so we're clear on what exactly tempos are, there's a few different definitions of it. If you were to go from Joel Jameson's Ultimate MMA Conditioning book, which I don't know if you've read it or not, highly recommend it just for understanding conditioning in general, not just for MMA athletes. He looks at the tempo method as your kind of solid strength work just for a little bit higher rep. So we don't mean that here. If you were to think of a middle distance runner, their tempo runs are where they might look at if their main event is a 10k, they might do 7k at a race pace. So that's their tempo run, or a half marathoner might do 15k at a race pace. That's not what we mean here either. The main thing we're looking at is Charlie Francis, old way. Charlie Francis is an old sprint coach. So his tempo method was basically to give his runners something to do that'll build them up aerobically on days they're not sprinting without wrecking them. So his most famous athlete was Ben Johnson. Leave the drugs aside, what his workout week would have typically looked at was one day he came down, he did some tempos just to loosen out after the weekend, and then he would have went really, really hard at a sprint work either Tuesday or Friday. All those other days he's doing tempos. The tempos are mainly 100, 150, maybe 200 meter runs. He was mainly focused on 100 at about 70% of his top speed, with nice recovery between them all. He built up to large volumes of those, but the key is there, he built up to them. So he was doing them on grass in runners to keep the impact down, because his impact when he was sprinting was quite a lot. But he's basically doing 100 meters. He was probably covering about 15, 16 seconds. Mere mortals like us, it's probably 18, 19, maybe 20. And he was doing those often on a rolling minute. So he set his stopwatch to go from 0 to about 16 seconds. It was taking him to do the run. If he felt like it, he'd walk back. Early in the season, when he's just built up a bit of capacity there, he's stopping and waiting, then running back. And he's doing maybe, like his first week back, he's probably doing maybe 10, 12 of those. Over the course of the season, he's probably building up to 20, 25 of those. And maybe he's doing a light jog back as well as his fitness builds up over time. That's one we found quite useful, both getting fit ourselves and working with teams. And that's one we'd kind of recommend for teams going forward. It's relatively easy to implement at the end of training. If you've done your specific Gaelic football games or your hurling games, or you're getting back into rugby pre-season even, you can add in 10 to 12 of those and slowly build them up over time as players' fitness starts to go up a bit after the long layoff we've had there.
And that's actually a great little way into current training at the moment for GAA teams, with a lot of us looking at the next 3 weeks being 3, 4 weeks being the big, I suppose, preseason that we're going to have, while also being our championship prep. So our normal fitness, our normal aerobic building is pretty much out the window for some teams. But without this, you're you're not putting enough load through your body. You're not going to be able to build enough fitness to compete, to stay in a position where you can play a game each week, as most championships are going to demand for. This gives this gives you a great option for, as you said, a lower impact. I know you mentioned lower impact from the perspective of his joints and just getting him off the track, but a lower impact on overall intensity as well, that going out and flogging lads with maybe 2-3 sets of mass runs that might have been there in your normal preseason at the moment may not actually be a great approach. Where something like this, you're setting something like, you know, a rolling clock there, rolling minute clock, could be very beneficial. And using your tempo runs there, setting yourself maybe week one maybe about 60%, maybe edging up a little bit. Then as you get a little bit more comfortable with that, with running again at this type of intensity, might be a good strategy. And I suppose one thing that I have found a lot of benefit from with these is that by using the rolling clock there, where you're roughly getting through your run in about maybe somewhere between 17, 20, 21, 22 seconds, depending on where the athlete is at. Having some form of an active recovery at the start of that, or an active exercise at the start of that, that as we discussed before, doesn't impact on your legs, doesn't impact on your ability to redo the run at the minute mark, but maybe setting yourself maybe 10, 15 seconds to do something at the end. If you're really trying to, you know, work on your overall endurance at the moment in a short space of time, you might find some benefit from that. Some things like that might include, you know, dropping down to do a few push-ups when you complete your 100, maybe doing some crunches, something like this, that isn't going to have an impact on your ability to run, but it's still going to be benefiting your endurance capacity and trying to, I suppose, shorten that recovery, but keep active recovery inside there as well. I suppose that's one of the that's one of the things that I think that could be a positive to in using tempos as well at the moment with a rolling clock. And I would kind of keep it at the distance to something like 100 meters roughly. I think you're ticking the box there, pushing it on much longer. Possibly at the end of a training session, you might overdo things if you're setting a rep range of anywhere between 8 and 12 at the end of your session there. I think you'll get a lot out of that at the moment, especially as you said, at the end of your session, after you've done your skills, your more game focused work, your game focused conditioning and gameplay, that this could be a very positive way to finish that, while it's still, you know, touching up your aerobic capacity, leaving you a good. It gives you a good window to increase it gradually on a week by week basis. Then, and it also allows you that if you feel that guys have gone out and had a particularly grueling game, say you've reached an extra time or something like that, this is an easy one then to just pull back on a little and do a little bit less, but it still keeps topping up that engine.
I think the active recovery you mentioned there is important to touch on, because I would, in a sense, make sure that it's recovery from the actual run. So if you're running and you're using quite a lot of leg, then yeah, push-ups are fine. Some form of core work is fine. You might get away with some calf raises, but I'm not going to dive into a set of tuck jumps or counter movement jumps, because they're just going to fatigue what you're developing. I think it'll also be important to sell it to the players, because if they're used to, I know I would have used mass quite a bit, so they're used to like 15 on, 15 off. If now they're going 20 on, 40 off, they're like, there's an awful lot of standing around here. Whereas just putting in a few push-ups, they might not actually fatigue them at all, but it gives them something to do for those 40 seconds. It makes them feel like they're working an awful lot harder. And if you have a manager standing on the sideline and he sees them doing all that extra work, he's like, oh yeah, he's pushing them there tonight, they'll be fit from this. And it's probably making little to no difference, those few, maybe 5, 8, maybe 10 push-ups in that little block of time. It makes it look like they're working a lot harder, and it makes the players feel like they're working an awful lot harder, but not taken away from the tempo runs that you're specifically focusing on. In terms of length there as well, I wouldn't look to go any longer than 100 meters. Possibly even shorten to 80, depending, you know, you might be tight for space, but I'd be looking to work on that 80 to 100 meter range pretty much the whole time, and build it up. First night, you're probably looking to start with maybe 10 reps, then build it up 2 to 3 reps each session. You know, realistically, you might only get a chance to do these once a week, and what our season's going to be max 8 weeks long, so you're going to build it from 10, maybe up to 20, possibly 24, but I don't know, is time really going to allow to give you 24 minutes to dedicate to doing those.
I would be very surprised if any team in the country would coming closer to championship allot that length of time. But it's actually, you touched on something important there, that you may only have one opportunity in the week to do this. So it's important to stress a little bit on a topic we mentioned last week, just that less is more with a lot of training at the moment. That if you're looking to do this 2 trainings a week, play a game, whether it's an AVB in-house or challenge game or whatnot, and you could over push guys at the moment. So if you're a coach listening, maybe implementing it in one training in the week and seeing how it develops, see how lads recover. If you're an athlete, if you're a player listening to this, and you're training twice in the week and you have a game as well, or you've 3 trainings in the week, and this isn't part of your training, or there doesn't seem to be a whole pile of conditioning running as part of your training, then be very careful with your application of it too, because you could over enthusiastically overload yourself with adding this in on an extra day. So you do have to take your current loads, your current management into this, and try and incorporate. I think incorporating something like these tempo runs that we're chatting about here in the format that we're chatting about them, I think they would be they're incredibly beneficial, but they can also, if overused or if they're done in addition to already a busy training a busy training load, that they could overdo it. So it's about incorporating these type strategies and these type runs that in a way that is actually going to benefit and not negate any other work being done by removing recovery time and that. So that's just something that I'd like if you had any thoughts on, Dan.
Yeah, so if you're a player and you feel there isn't enough conditioning work being done at training, realistically there probably is. You're just a bit over eager. But if you do really want to get in that extra session, and you go down to the pitch yourself someday, the first thing I'd make sure you're doing is make sure you're bringing either a football or a hurling slitter with you, so that is still your primary focus. And in the short window we have, you still need to focus on your actual sport. When you go down there, I'd probably spend 15-20 minutes doing your warm-up predominantly with the ball, whether it be at the wall, whether it be just hitting the ball and running after it nice and easily, and then getting your body weight kind of strength work in there as much as possible, whether it be split squats, single leg RDLs, some core work, some jumps, everything that way. Then maybe 12 to 15 tempos, but focus on giving yourself decent rest between them all. One of the hidden benefits of tempos, I think, why sprinters find them so beneficial to build up our capacities, you can really focus on movement quality, but your actual running mechanics. Focus on getting that high knee, getting that toe up as you're running, using your arms each time you run, because they don't fatigue you near as much as a mass run or any kind of repeated sprint stuff. Your 15th rep, you're still fresh enough to focus on moving really, really well, holding that good posture. If you want to look up a couple of YouTube videos before you go down of good running technique, sprinting technique, not so much middle distance running technique, look at them and focus on those as you're doing every single rep. If you feel like, I'm not being pushed hard enough in these, well, that's something for you to focus on. And then again, finish off with some, again, sport specific work, striking the ball over the bar, kicking the ball right and left, whatever it be that way.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great one.
They're also worth considering if because management of teams and players can be quite difficult at the minute with if you have a challenge match on Sunday and you have a panel of 30 and you're playing 3 blocks of 20 minutes, and some lads are playing the full 60 or 65 depending on how things roll over, and some lads might only get to bear 20. Just try and keep an eye on how many minutes everyone is getting. And generally I don't like the runs after games, particularly if it's subs who haven't got game time or anything like that. But in a situation like this, when it's in pre-season and everyone is getting some game time, that is a good chance to apply some tempos to get a bit of extra work in. Because if someone has gone to a game, it might be an hour away, they're only getting 20 minutes of game time in, like realistically, they're going to fall back a little bit in terms of fitness if that happens a couple of times. And if they've waited from Tuesday or Thursday to Tuesday between training sessions, trying to get everyone some little bit of equal playing time, or else top that up with the tempo runs, can be a big help there.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly. That's actually a fantastic one. It could be used as well, that like instead of adding in at the end, especially for guys who haven't played or whatever, you could actually say if guys are, in for a certain period of the game and then they're out for another 10-15 minutes, there's nothing stopping them from getting a run, that from using that time while the game is going on to get that conditioning in and then come back and be into the game, if they're to be reintroduced. um, because I suppose you do have the psychological impact too of going to a game, maybe not playing as much as other lads, and then being told, okay, well now after the game has finished, we're going to go running. It's a deflating feeling, and it's something that I think while it might not be considered ideal, I think fitting your runs in there for guys who may not be getting as much game time in any kind of a challenge game or something like that, that at least they're being put to work there and then, and you can put them in again after they've runs done, or something like that. I think it beats standing around in between. Like I say, if you have a guy in, you take him out, you stand him there for 20 minutes, and then you put him in again. I think this would be a much better option than just standing around watching the game and then going back in again after doing another small little warm up. What would your thoughts on that be, Murph? Or do you think it would be a good idea to split them out and keep them at the end anyway?
Depends obviously on resources, depending on how many coaches you have there and everything like that. It is hard to manage sometimes at the end, and players can just be like, oh, I'm fed up, particularly if they haven't either had enough game time or they've played poorly, and then going running can be such a, oh Jesus. I think early in the season, and we obviously are very early in the season, there is a bit more of an eagerness there on players, and if you let them know beforehand, particularly to the players that may not get full game time or coming back from injury or whatever like that, that we might try and get a bit running in afterwards here, lads, particularly anyone who doesn't get more than 40 minutes, just to keep everything topped up, and communicating that to them in advance is a help. But if it's a case of they play the game, they've just been taken off, they're standing around for 10 minutes, then the game is over, and you're like, okay, we're going to run now, that's automatically just going to annoy everyone. So the actual logistics of it can be hard enough to manage, but you do need to let everyone know well in advance what's likely to come here, and say that we're just keeping an eye on everyone's playing time here, and we want to make sure everyone is as fit as possible for championship in 3 weeks' time. This certainly isn't a punishment run or anything like that. Which I suppose brings us on to then, if you're not just going back training for GAA, if you're just going back to the gym in general, with all those open up, what are some ways we can see about managing that and not going straight back in, hitting ourselves with excitement the first day back in the gym, doing 5 sets of 12 on every single exercise in there, and being broken down for about a week afterwards?
Yeah, so I suppose I can see it at the moment in I think we may have actually had a little bit of a technical glitch there for a few seconds, just if that's caught on the video. But yeah, so a little bit of conversation just around that I'm, from stuff that I'm seeing and from stuff that I'm hearing from people and questions I'm getting from clients on what to do now that I'm going back to training. Should I go back to doing what I was doing pre-COVID? And how should I go back into approaching that? And it over eagerness and enthusiasm is they're definitely abundant at the moment, but you have to be smart too. You do have to take a look at what you're doing, understand that you quite possibly have not been putting yourself through the movements that you would in, say, especially in a gym scenario. So if you're squatting, deadlifting, you're doing pull-ups or bench press, whatever it might be that you're doing, even if it is a machine-based movement, that I would advise heavily that maybe for the next week or two, that you slowly lead yourself back into those movements. Take whatever your normal weights that you were lifting pre-COVID, maybe drop them down to 50 or 60% of what that was. Get comfortable with the movements, get comfortable going through the motions, get comfortable with the technique of what you're trying to get back into, and then as you've assessed how you're doing and what that feels like, then start to build your weights back up or build your intensity back up a little bit. That basically the risk here is that you go back to what you were doing because that's what you remember, that's what you're sure in your head, sure, that's what I was doing, obviously I can go back and do that again. But having 3 months basically of doing low levels of exercise, even if you have kept going, chances are you have not been able to you haven't been in a position where you can work on those strength based movements. And it would be a good idea to just edge your way in, and that way you're reducing injury risk. You're getting comfortable with the movement again. You're less likely to stress over it or struggle with recovery from it. And so that would be how I am currently guiding people back into going to the gym and lifting weights again, if that's their particular target.
Because lifting weights have probably been the hardest thing to access over the last 3 months. So people, if you're predominantly lifting weights in the gym or that was your main form of exercise, you've spent the last 3 months either doing nothing, doing body weight exercises, so the actual force you've been able to lift has gone way down, or you've been doing a lot of running, whether it be 5K or stuff like that. All three are leading to a lot less weight being lifted, and probably a loss of muscle mass, something like you haven't been used to. Like realistically, 3 months away from the gym, it's quite a lot, particularly if you've been gymming for quite some time. So some guidelines around going back. The big things I'd say is limit yourself to a max of 8 exercises. I think 8 is quite a lot your first time back, but a max of 8, and realistically try and keep to 6. I certainly wouldn't do any more than 2 working sets of any exercise. Just ease yourself back in to keep volume quite a bit lower, and it gives you a chance to explore to see where are my strength levels at. If you were before benching, you were probably benching something like 120 or something like that. If you done around a lot less than that, so I have to go in and just bench the bar to see where am I at now. Okay, I'll put on 5s and see how I'm going there. And that gives you, just by limiting yourself to 2 working sets, it gives you a chance to build up to that strength you were at beforehand, but also without feeling too deflated that I'm feeling so weak at the minute. Same with squats, deadlifts, whatever like that. Of those 8 exercises, I try and keep at least half of them to bilateral dumbbell based stuff, so that you're not killing yourself with bench press, squat, deadlift, cleans, all the real heavy compound lifts that are not just going to make you sore but really wreck your central nervous system too. So 3 main guidelines there. Limit yourself to 8 exercises, 2 working sets per exercise, and probably set a clock to keep yourself 50, so that's 50 minutes or less in the gym, just while you build yourself back up to where you were beforehand.
And actually, the only one that I would add to that there would possibly rep ranges. That don't be going in looking at your 12 to 15 and going, I'm going to hit hypertrophy hard here, going to try and build muscle mass quickly. Give yourself your 6 to 8 reps, get comfortable with the movement, and be sure of what you're getting back into, because it is very enticing. It's very it's enticing, the eagerness to get back into it, to get pushing yourself hard, that it can be, it's very easy to go overboard with it. So that's the only that would be the only addition that I would add to that. I'm not sure now if that picked that up, because it may have gone down again. The internet is great at times.
I think we got sound there, which is in the video. You were frozen first. I think 6 to 8 is a really good suggestion there as well, because it's high enough not to like go 1 RM in your back squat or your deadlift again when maybe technique has completely disappeared over the last 3 months. It's low enough as well not to bring in massive muscle damage from your, as you said, your 12 to 15 reps there either.
And actually, just on that there, if you're somebody then who did not exercise maybe a whole pile, if at all, pre-COVID, both you've taken the time during this to assess your lifestyle, and you're looking to make a change as a result of it, and you're looking to maybe get into exercise, or you're looking to maybe join a gym, or you're looking to take up running, or whatever it may be. It might be quite similar to the buzz that is often there around January, post Christmas, that I suppose now is it's a great time to get going at things. But like, just the same as people who are used to training and used to exercising coming back into it again, an over eagerness at the start, or choosing an exercise modality or type that you don't really like, these are things to kind of consider. So to focus in on what it is you're actually attracted to doing, a type of exercise that you find it might be interesting, might be fun, might help you achieve whatever your own individual goals or targets or lifestyle are, and set a long-term goal with them. So if you're looking at, say, if we take the gym, for example, because it's the most common form of exercise that people tend to go for, that if you take, okay, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to go as hard as I can, I'm just going to take it up, I'm going to push hard for 6 weeks. You might well push hard for 6 weeks, but you're not really implementing any kind of a lifestyle change there, and you're kind of forcing yourself into doing something that long-term does not interest you. So maybe it may be worth maybe looking at other options that you might be able to keep going much longer and ease yourself into it and take it on. So that would be my main thing with that. Have you any thoughts around that for your, keeping in mind your people, or your type of person who maybe just wasn't interested in exercising or couldn't exercise for some particular reason?
I think the main thing there would be to give yourself as much options as possible. So don't confine yourself to one gym that really focuses on bodybuilding, and then 4 weeks down the road you realize, Joe, I'm not that into physique. I'd like to focus on getting stronger, or I'd like to focus on something class-based or something a bit more, aerobic development. If you can try and get a short-term membership somewhere that lets you sample as much as possible, whether it be HIIT classes, spinning classes, some swimming, some weights-based stuff, it gives you some bit of access to maybe one of the trainers in the gym as well, that just gives you a bit of guidance around what you're doing. So you can spend maybe your first 4, 6, 8 weeks in the gym just trying to find out, what do I like? What am I a bit weak at that I would really like to improve? And what do I think I'd like to explore a bit more? Like I said, just to give yourself as many options as possible so you can explore a bit further and find what's most likely to keep you going, exercising and being active in the long term, as opposed to what's going to get me super fit in 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's a great point.
On that, I think we probably could dedicate a full episode to try and set goals when you're starting out, when you're a bit into exercise, whatever like that. And probably brings us to a bit of a finish for today. We're going to start focusing in on nutrition, because we're probably both a little bit stronger on nutrition over the next 4-6 weeks, and dipping into a few different aspects of nutrition there. So if you have any particular things you'd like us to dip into, just give us a shout. Otherwise, we have a few bits lined up, but we'd always be open to a few more suggestions.
Yeah, we'd hate to be left off on our own trail the whole time. So some guidance or some tips on what you might like to hear a little bit more of would be great. And I suppose I'd just like to take this chance to say a thank you for everyone who reached out or gave feedback or came in with questions as a result of the last episode that we put out. So that it is brilliant to hear back from people and to be able to gauge how the information we're putting out is getting across. All right.
Thank you.
Brilliant.